network now. All right. Yes, so our Lenten schedule will be 1 o'clock on Wednesdays starting March 9th on Zoom, and then 7:30 p.m. in person, alternating between Gloria Dei, St. Peter's, King of Kings, Gloria Dei, St. Peter's, for those weeks. And we will get
Gotcha.
the schedule out to you guys. Today we're going to continue with so we have 2 more weeks of the parables. So today we're going to do a bunch of, last week you had mentioned a bunch of the parables of the kingdom of God. So we're going to start with Matthew 13.
Right there.
Matthew 13.
Matthew 13, 31
31.
to 32.
That's short.
We're going to do a whole bunch of these little ones here. So someone wants to read Matthew 13, 31 to 32.
I can read that. It's too short enough. He put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all the seeds, but when it has grown, it is the greatest of shrubs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make their nests in its branches.
Okay, so in this one, we have the kingdom of heaven being compared to a seed. Now, the mustard seed, I think we touched on this another time, and
Yeah.
it's right. Joe looked up, right? It's not the tiniest, but it's almost the tiniest little seed, right?
In that, I think Pete corrected and said in that area. That's
Right.
Right.
Orchid.
What would have been the tiniest seed they would have known about at the time. And so it's a tiny, you've probably seen, sometimes they'll make little jewelry out of it, and it's tiny, like little bead of a seed, and yet it grows this big, wild, bushy mustard seed plant that kind of grows wild and takes over. And many people didn't want to plant it because it would take over your garden, and it would just grow wild. It's like a wild weed that would grow. So here Jesus is comparing the kingdom of heaven to something that starts out small, but then takes over the world, gets so big that we can't control it. So he's trying to tell them that, okay, so even if your faith starts as tiny and your understanding starts as a tiny little nugget, that's okay. Don't worry, because it can grow and grow, and then it'll take over everything. So how do you think the people hearing that might have felt? Thinking of heaven as this wild plant.
Well, maybe they couldn't even imagine something like that, with Jesus saying that you take this little seed and then it grows this plant that's huge. They might have said to themselves, what is he talking about? This is ridiculous. This can't happen.
Right. And why would you want this weed? Like, why are you comparing yourself to a weed? That's nuts. That's like, who wants that? We try to stop those things from growing. We don't want them in our garden because they're uncontrollable. But that's what Jesus is saying. Like, you're not gonna be able to stop it. This is, once it gets going, it's going to be unstoppable, and it's just going to keep going and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's going to provide home for the birds and to make nests, and it's going to be like take everyone in. So it'll be a place for everyone to nest, everyone to be part of. So to us who are happy with Jesus's message, that's a good message, right? That this is going to get so big that it's going to take over everything. But if you were not buying into what Jesus was saying, if you thought that he was a troublemaker, you'd be like, whoa, wait a minute now, you're going to take over everything? That's not such a good thing. So this was tough for some of them to hear. And here we're going to talk about some of the harder, tougher parables to hear here. The next one is only one line, verse 33. Who wants to read that one?
I'll read.
Yes, just before you get to that.
Okay, sure.
So they probably knew how prolific this bush became, right? And so that, like you said, they probably felt threatened by him saying that. Such a tiny little thing with such a insignificant Jewish carpenter's son is talking, and he's saying that this insignificant person is going to become, it's going to be what they're conceived to be worldwide, and like almost like a virus that just took over everything. Hate to use that term,
Yeah.
No,
but
yeah,
so they had to have felt very threatened by that.
sure. And the fact that, like you said, the mustard seed was so little that you could just overlook it, right? Who needs that? We don't need it. Oh, well, I'm sure when it started in some of the farmers' gardens, they'd pull it up right away so that it wouldn't get big because they didn't want it to take over their garden. Like any of you that are gardeners, right? If you have those kind of weeds that take over, you try to get rid of them fast because you don't want to wait, like me, until they take over your whole garden and then you're in trouble. So you want to try to get rid of it as soon as possible so that it's out of there and doesn't damage the other, flowers or what you have in there, and so it doesn't take over. So here Jesus is saying, yeah, you're not gonna be able to stop this. It's gonna take over. And it's gonna, just like you say, keep growing and growing, and you're not gonna be able to stop it. So it was kind of a warning shot, kind of a pushback to some of them that thought he was, just the carpenter's son and insignificant, and we don't have to pay attention to this guy. It was kind of a, nope, this is something to contend with, and you got to take this seriously
I
because
love
this is
the
the thing.
idea of the weed, right? So weeds, for me, like the mint, of course, you plant it once, you have it forever, even it doesn't matter how much you pull it out, but it's hard to pull out weeds. My annuals come out, I don't even have to barely touch them, they're falling out. But when you get a weed in there, they're really hard to pull out. So I love that kind of a connection. And then I was just kind of thinking, we call dandelions weeds, but I love them so much. They spread these happy little flowers, and you can eat them in a salad. So,
That's right.
What are we calling a weed? Like what things do we call a weed? It's just kind of this idea of God's kingdom like a weed. I think is fantastic.
Well, and I think one man's weed is another man's flower. Like, in my last congregation, when I moved into the parsonage, it was over the winter. And so by the springtime, the previous pastor had turned a big chunk of the backyard into these gardens, but it was just wild and crazy stuff in there. Like it was wild stuff. And I was like, what am I going to do with this? It took up like half the yard, all this wild stuff. I didn't know what most of it was. And so I knew the previous pastor. So I said, if you're in the area, could you stop by the house and just tell me, like, what's a weed? What can I pull out? What's going on here? Oh, sure, he says. So he comes over and he starts naming all these things for me. And turns out they were all weeds, but he was calling them wildflowers and he liked them, So I basically said, so they're all weeds. And he goes, well, yeah, but look how pretty. To me, they were not pretty. It was a mess. But to him, it was a beautiful garden that kept changing because the different, weeds would sprout at different times or whatever. But to me, it was just a big tangled mess of stuff. So I'm sure much to his displeasure, we cut it all out. But um,
Well,
but for him,
hello, may I say something?
sure,
Hello?
yes, hello.
Some of the things that people call weeds are really medicinal herbs.
Yes.
Right.
So that's one
Yeah.
use for many of the things that he identified for you. And I don't know, I consider mustard a condiment, and I wonder whether the Jews ground it up and mixed it with vinegar and used it to spice some of their foods.
For hot
The
dog.
question was, you don't want it growing where you want your barley or some of your other crops to grow.
Right.
So I
Right,
don't
yeah.
really see mustard as a weed. It is an herb, and it has a use. Many cultures find it very good for seasoning food.
Yeah, I would imagine they
feel it.
probably season stuff with it then. I don't know, but they also knew that it would take over the gardens and kill other crops. So for those that didn't want that much of it or didn't, want it to contaminate the other crops, it was not a thing that you wanted a lot of. And it grew fast. But yeah, no, you're right, Joan. When the pastor came and, some of it was lavender and some of it was different things that were herbs and medicinal things, but I'm not into that kind of stuff. So, and it had been so overgrown with other stuff that it just looked nasty. But that was me. He loved it, but it just show how it like took over the whole place. So the next parable is of the yeast. It says he told them another parable. Kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed in with 3 measures of flour until all of it was leavened. So here again, just using another thing that expands, right? Anybody that bakes knows that if you put yeast in with some flour and water and activate it, it will go from a tiny little thing to it can overflow. Depending on how much of a mixture, it can overflow the container it's in, but it expands. It becomes something better, something bigger. So here in these 2 parables, he's talking about something that starts out small and gets bigger and better, right? So the kingdom of heaven is like a small little seed, but then it grows to be huge and overtake everything. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that starts as just a tiny, like yeast. If you've looked at the dry yeast, it's just like a little powdery, pebbly stuff, right? But once it's activated with the flour and the water, it grows into this big loaf, which becomes tasty bread or cookies or whatever you're making with it. So it becomes something better, right? You don't necessarily want to eat the raw dough, not necessarily good for you, but yummy is the bread that comes that comes out of the oven once that yeast has activated and becomes something much bigger and better. So these are talking about a great result coming from very humble, tiny beginnings. And again, Jesus is trying to get going and make his inroads and showing them that, okay, maybe it's not so great now, but it's gonna expand.
I like the idea that it goes from the mustard seed in the fields to the yeast in the home. So he's getting all the people. He's getting the farmers and he's getting the housewives.
Very good point.
So
Very good point.
Right.
he was,
And
he
that's
was not
right. And that's why he
just
tells
saying-
different. Right. That's why he tells all kinds of different stories. He'll tell one about seeds and planting to get like the farmers. Then he'll tell another one about maybe the shepherds and raising
Mhm.
livestock to get the people that work with animals. And then he'll tell another one about like the vineyards and the workers, so like the landowners, to try to get them involved. And now this one is for those who work in the home, right? They made their own bread then. They couldn't go to the grocery store and buy a bag of bread. They had to make their own bread. So they would all be very familiar with having to get some yeast to make the bread rise. That would be something everybody knew about in that day and age. Um,
What's the significance of 3 measures of flour? I mean, or is there anything with the number 3?
um,
Anybody, any tidbit on that?
I'm not
I
sure
have
that
3
the,
measures of flour is like 50 pounds, enough to make 100 loaves of bread.
Is it?
so that's another abundance there.
Yeah, it says for a batch of dough, big batch of dough.
Yeah, big batch.
All right.
So
Thank
it's
you.
like you're taking a little bit of yeast and you make a big batch, again, to feed a family for a long time, to feed a community, to have like a big party. Talking about going from something little to something huge, an abundance of
And
something
it's a
that,
starter. They say it's a starter, so that's
right.
interesting.
Right. So any of you have anything to know anything about like starter dough?
Yep.
Right? That's
Gonna
shaking
ask-
their head, right? Yeah. So starter dough is something that someone will start, and it's usually a little bit, and then you have to add things to it, add water, stir it, add yeast, all kinds of concoctions depending on which kind of starter you have. And then it starts growing, and then you split it and you give starter away to someone else. So now they have a
Right.
starter, and and it just keeps going. And people have starter for years if they
Years, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Years. Can get
And you
passed
gotta
down.
keep that baby alive, to keep going.
Yeah.
You're trapped. I was trapped for like 10 years making bread because somebody gave me a starter.
Well, that's the thing. It's kind of like a blessing and a curse. It's like, oh, thanks. But then if you kill it, you feel bad. Like if you let it
Yeah,
go, you
yeah.
feel bad. But you can only keep baking so much, and you only have so many friends that'll take some more starter. They're like, no, I don't want any more.
Yeah. Gotta
But
feed it.
that's right. You got to feed it. I usually was pretty good at this. I got a batch. I guess it was last winter, maybe the winter before someone gave me from COVID. I don't know. I did
Oh,
something wrong.
really? That's great.
It died on me. It didn't do nothing. I don't know if the temperature was right or I don't
You
know.
didn't feed it.
I didn't feed it right, obviously. I
feed
thought
me.
I thought I was very precise in the instructions, but I went wrong somewhere, and it didn't do anything. So then I just went to making my own bread. Not great. It was delicious, but not a good habit. But anyway, yeah. So anyone that's known from starters or baking bread knows that and the little bit of yeast makes like a big thing because it just activates. And again, that's something, it activates something. So talking about like activating our faith, getting us moving. Like sometimes we need a little bit of kickstart, a little bit of watering, feeding to get us going and to get us growing in our faith. So let's go back now to the parable of the weeds among the wheat, which is 24. 24 to 30. It should be right before the mustard seed.
Parable of the weeds.
Yeah,
One wants to read that?
yeah, I will. He put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to someone who sowed good seed in his field. But while everybody was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and then went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared as well. And the slaves of the householder came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where then did these weeds come from? He answered, an enemy has done this. The slaves said to him, then do you want us to go and gather them? But he replied, no, for in gathering the weeds, you would uproot the wheat along with them. Let both of them grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time, I will tell the reapers, collect the weeds first and bind
them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn.
Okay, so here's one of the parables aimed at those who do some farming, who raise wheat crop, and they would know that there's a seed called darnel. It resembles wheat when it's young. So somehow this got mixed in with the farmer's wheat field, and the farmer is saying, no, don't touch it now because you can't tell which is which, right? You're not going to be able to tell what's wheat, what's this darnel, this wheat, this weed, because they haven't grown up, they haven't matured yet. So you got to let it grow, and then when it gets ready to harvest, then you can see, then you'll be able to tell the difference between them. So who is who's who in this parable?
Well, I'm guessing the landowner is God.
Okay, the farmer, yeah.
Okay, and the enemy, I suppose, is the devil. And the slaves are us, the rest of us,
Okay,
That's-
and
the way I'm reading it.
okay, who would be the weeds and the wheat?
The world.
Good point.
World. And who's in the world?
Good and bad.
Good and evil.
Good and bad people, right? People that do good and people that do evil, right? Is it, if you saw a lineup of 10 people, would you be able to tell just by looking at them who was a good person and who was not a good person?
No,
No,
Not necessarily, right? You might see someone that maybe was down on their luck and looked all disheveled, and you might say, oh, that person's probably not good. But they could be the most kind, gentlest, generous, wonderful person in the world. They just maybe don't care about their appearance, or they're down on the luck at the moment. And you could have someone all spiffed up and in the best suit and looking great, and it could be the most vile person ever, right? But so you can't tell who's a good person and who's a bad person. Well, how do we know who's a good and what determines then? If we can't tell by just looking, how would we know who we might term good and who we might turn evil?
by their actions.
They do.
behavior.
By their behavior, their actions, right? Can we tell when they're like little babies?
No, that's right, no.
No, all babies are sweet and wonderful, and
Unless you're Chucky.
you know, you can't tell.
Mm.
Sorry? Especially who?
What I said,
Unless-
I said unless they're Chucky.
Oh,
I have to throw some levity in once in a while.
there you go. Yeah, so we have to wait for someone to grow up and mature before their characteristics of being a good or a bad person are more evident, right? So we can't tell when someone's born, we can't tell when they're little, usually. I mean, I guess once in a while you maybe can tell if a little kid is going to be a bad seed, but usually kids, just need to grow up and mature, and then they, kind of level out. So it's not until someone is a little bit older till they start interacting with people, start making decisions, and that's when our decision making can turn bad or good, right? We can make bad decisions that maybe are hurtful to people, or good decisions to help people. So here, Jesus, he's comparing that to people that want to judge each other too quickly, right? Without really knowing much about them, with just thinking of where they come from, maybe what they look like, maybe some rumors they've heard, and not necessarily knowing the person, or being able to see what the person is all about. So Jesus is telling them, no, you got to wait until people really, as they say, show their true colors, right? Until someone is able to show what they're about. And for some people, it's not until they get much older in life. And so here he's comparing it to the wheat and the weeds. So like at the harvest time, which would be, when do you think the harvest time would be for us?
In the fall.
No, for the
Oh,
person.
for heaven. Oh, not heaven. At the end, when we die.
Right, when we're ready to go to the kingdom of heaven is when we're like, we would be God's people, like harvested, right? So God's saying you got to give people a chance to live their life before you can decide who's a bad seed and who needs to be pulled out, or who might be good. Do sometimes evil people turn around and become good people?
Yes.
Yeah, that happens a lot. Do sometimes good people turn evil?
Yeah.
That happens too, right? So, Jesus said, you gotta give people every opportunity to live into what they're gonna become. You can't be too harsh to judge too quickly. Give people second chances, and let people, and it says grow up together. So we need to live with those who maybe we don't think are the best people, but we need to be able to live in community with them until forever, right? He's also talking about judgment. Who gets to judge
Right.
who is bad and who is good?
Well, the reaper, whoever the reapers are. Well, maybe not.
Well, but it's
The angels who work for
farmer
God.
telling the reapers what is good and bad, right?
Right, he is telling them. That's right, he is. Yeah.
Yes. Says, let them grow together until the harvest, and at harvest time, I will tell the reapers.
Right, and then then they got to
It's
separate.
like the last minute. Right.
They literally have to separate all
Right.
these
So
other.
then they'll. Right. So he's going to put
So
the
they already
wheat
know.
into the barn.
Yeah, they already know which is the weed. The reapers know. The farmer's telling them separate the weeds from the wheat after everything's been harvested. It's like the
Right.
sheep. What is that? Something in Revelation
Even
about
the
on
goats.
one,
Yeah.
And the goats.
the sheeps and the goats. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of these stories talk about the judgment and talk about
Yeah.
whose job is it to judge? Is it our job, or is it God's job to judge people?
Only God's
God's
job.
job.
God's job.
It's God's job, right?
Mhm.
Because we're not always a good judge of someone. I mean, sometimes it's obvious that someone is a bad person, but again, we don't know anything about their motivation, about their history, about what maybe led them to something. It's like all those stories where it says pray for your enemy, pray for those who harm you. To like remember that, yeah, that axe murderer, well, they have a mom and a dad too, and they have a family, and we don't necessarily know the story, and it's God's job to judge. Now, obviously, it's up to our civil laws or whatever to hold people accountable for laws they break and things that they do. But as far as ultimate judgment, it's I always say that's above my pay grade. God has the ultimate ruling on who will be in heaven and who will not be in heaven, and who will be in relationship with God forever. That's God's choice to make, not ours. But at the time, people were judging each other, right? People were deciding, oh, those people are bad, those people are good, they're insiders, they're outsiders, we don't want to hang out with those people. So Jesus tells a lot of these parables about how to deal with people, and how people can grow. Right before this was the parable of the sower that explained that we did, where he talks about how all the seed starts out, but some grows faster than others, some falls away, some gets burnt out. So God plants the gardens and has to wait and see like what happens with all the seed. And some of it thrives better than others, but part of it is waiting to see how things play out.
Is he trying,
And
is he addressing the Pharisees and those the highly religious who think that they're certainly the good, they're certainly the good wheat. I mean, because they do
Sure.
everything they're supposed to do. I mean, is he giving a slight dig here?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. He always gives digs to them.
This
You know.
Jesus was like something completely new.
Oh, yeah.
And before that, they were given this set of rules. Do this and you'll be good with God.
Right.
That's
Right.
right.
And
So this
which
is a real
which
turnaround.
is-
A real different way to look at things.
It is, which is why we always need to be careful how we judge the Jewish people and Pharisees and things, because
Rose,
just like persecuting the early Christians because he thought they were breaking Jewish laws, right? And they were, but then he met Jesus on the road to Damascus and talked to, Jesus set him straight, and he turned around and had the conversion. So it wasn't until people got more information and began to learn, which is why Paul then spent his life going around to the synagogues and the temples and teaching his fellow Jewish people that no, you got them all wrong. This is what he was, this is what Jesus's message is. Because it was a revolutionary message to the people, and hard to hear, very hard to hear.
well, especially
Most of his
from him,
message.
because he's supposed to be one of the
Sure.
top, like you said, the top guys, and he really, I think he almost preferred to speak to the Gentiles, because I don't think the Jews liked him.
Sure.
Oh, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
would you want to go into a place where they're all going to be yelling at you, trying to chase you out of town?
Yeah,
Nope. Nope, not for me, thanks.
like a
Yeah,
traitor
of
to
course
their
you
cause.
somewhere where they're like, oh, you're wonderful. They're gathering at his feet and, fawning over him, sure. But he didn't shy away from those places that were tough and the challenging places.
No, he didn't have it
went
so easy either.
both. And I'm sorry?
I said he didn't have it so easy either, being lowered out of baskets down
What'd you
walls.
say, Janet?
I was saying that he didn't have it so easy either. Even when he went to the outside, I mean, he was always escaping from
Right.
someplace or thrown in
Nope.
jail somewhere.
Oh yeah. Yep. No, and that's many of the early disciples and the prophets had a hard life because they were chosen by God to to tell a very unpopular message. They were chosen to try to correct people, to try to inform them. And nobody wants to be told that you're making mistakes, that you're wrong. We all want to be patted on the back and say, good job, good job. And when someone comes around saying, yeah, you're doing it all wrong, you need to turn around. Like, wait a minute, who are you to tell me that? Yeah, and you know, if they looked at their scripture and read it in a certain way, they were looking for a different type of Messiah than Jesus was. Certainly. And so that was part of the problem too. So it's like, no, the person that's going to save us is going to be a king, and he's going to restore peace, and we're going to get our land back. And you're not doing any of that for us. You're just telling us that we're wrong and we got to turn around. That's not my kind of Messiah. I don't like that. So it was hard for people to get it. Let's look at further down now, past the parable of the yeast, at verse 36 to 43. Someone wants to read that.
Then he left the crowd and went into the house. His disciples came to him and said, explain to us the parable of the weeds in the field. And he answered, the one who sowed the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed stands for the sons of the kingdom. The weeds are the sons of the evil one, and the enemy who sows them is the devil. The harvest at the end of the age, and the harvesters are angels. As the weeds are pulled up and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they will weed out of his kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil. They will throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let him hear.
Right. So this is all at the end of the age. And again, they were all expecting this end of the age to come in their lifetimes. They thought this was going to be soon. I'm sure if you went back and talked to any of them now, if you were able to do that, they'd be like, 2,000 years later and the world hasn't ended yet? What the heck? Like, why are you people still here? Like, this is supposed to end a long time ago. And then Matthew likes his weeping and gnashing of teeth. To refer to those that are not in the kingdom, those that get cast out, those that don't have a relationship with God in heaven, those that sinful, evil, those that were not buying into the message, not part of being it calls them here the children of the kingdom. Excuse me. But again, it's at the end of the age, so it's giving people the chance to become what they become. And if the evil one gets to them more and they turn out to be weeds, then they will be cast aside, and the ones that have the faith, get the message, will be included. But it's at the final judgment. It's after you have your whole life to get on board, to be able to learn how to live with one another in love and treat each other well. So how do we feel about some of these all these these talking about the end times and the how we'll be judged?
Well, it makes for good Catholic theology. I mean, it really
You
does.
talk
It's-
about
you
a
could-
lot of these at the Catholic Church, right?
Yeah, you could take any one of these things, and I can remember hearing them, well, you better, it's either this or that. This is what you have to do. And Janice was saying about in the Old Testament, that they had a lot of rules. This is what you have to do. So these parables are very, some of them are very, this is the way it is, and God will judge. And Jesus will judge, the ever-loving Jesus will judge you. So it can be taken, you can see where it can be taken very literally.
Mm-hmm.
And it's scary a little bit.
Sure.
And it seems to conflict with the verses that say that none of this is good enough. It's only by the mercy and the grace of God, like an amazing grace.
Right, that's true.
Right.
It's not by our
So-
works that we're saved.
Right, but by God's grace. So how would that fit into this weeds and this wheat, do you think? How would we put in God's grace to that parable?
I don't know.
No, I think it's God's grace is that he gives them a chance. He doesn't just let everything get ripped out. He gives everybody a chance, and he gives everybody the water, and he gives everybody the whatever else the plant needs to grow and do it, and it's out there. I don't know how literally you have to take every single thing, but it's also showing he's giving you time and food and information and care and
Right.
and giving you time to do what are you going to do with it.
Right. And what we also have to remember about some of these parables is usually with these parables, Jesus is trying to get like one message across.
One point.
He's not using one parable to teach everybody everything about being a Christian. He's using it to get one message across, which is why he's got lots and lots of stories that he tells. So he kind of tries to keep it simple. And sometimes I think we overanalyze some of the parables and try to find five or, well, how many things can I pick apart here? Well, what is this and what is that? And I think sometimes we get too much in the weeds, so to speak,
Mm.
of some of these parables and look for stuff that's not there. Okay, so if we boil some of these down to like the mustard seed talks about something small growing, like so, right? So your faith can grow and overtake and expand, right? Same thing with like the yeast. It once it gets active, so talk about our active faith. If we can stir it and nurture it and give it the right yeast, the right stuff to grow, which what would be yeast for us? What do you think would be our yeast that would allow us to grow and expand?
Faith?
Faith. Or what would help our faith grow and expand?
Oh,
Yeah, for sure.
The word.
Was it the word?
The word.
Read the
yeah,
Bible. Read the Bible.
right. Studying it like
Right.
this, talking about it, trying to learn more about what was going on at the time, what people might have been thinking, right? That helps grow our faith. Spending time with other people of faith, right? To talk about things that helps us grow our faith. That's our yeast. Sessions like this, going to worship, going to taking part in Bible studies or education things, like Joe's in diaconia. I know Carol's taken diaconia. Vicar Jean and I are both graduates of diaconia. I don't know if there's anyone else here, but that's a way to purposely like grow your faith and kind of stir the pot and get the yeast bubbling up in us to help our faith grow. But there's lots of ways for us to get that, right? Or that nourishment, what we need. The plant's got the water, in the weeds and the wheat, they got the water, the sunlight, maybe they got some fertilizer or something that would help them grow, whatever they needed. But they don't all like the sower parable that came before it. They're not all going to grow the same way. Some are going to find a little rocky piece of ground and they're not going to be able to take root. Some are going to be left out in the blazing sun and kind of dry up and burn up. Some might get too much water and kind of get flooded. And I mean, that's not one of the parable of the sower ones, but I know I've killed many a plant by overwatering them.
I
Yeah.
said that.
Yeah. So, but you have to know the right mix, which I obviously don't. But so
And
all
as
that
Lutherans,
is
we're all
repenting.
Satan's sinners simultaneously, right? And so this
Right.
parable is kind of shocking for us, gnashing of teeth and being thrown into the fire.
Nobody likes
and
that.
Someone asked Bishop Eggensteiner, so are we all going to get tossed into the fiery furnace, that kind of thing? And Bishop Eggensteiner said, yeah, we believe in hell. He goes, but I don't think there's going to be many folks there, that we have a gracious, loving, forgiving, merciful God. And that's what we cling to.
Right. And that's what Joan was talking about. Where's the mercy? Where's the grace? That's the fact that the weeds are allowed to show themselves. The weeds are allowed to grow up and see what becomes of them. That we are given multiple chances to, I mean, multiple of his stories. One's about how many times you forgive someone, 7 times 70, or depending on which version of it you read, right? But many, many times is the outcome. It's like we don't just forgive someone once and say, well, you had your chance. That's it. I'm done with you. We keep forgiving, just as God keeps forgiving us. And so those are the ones that balance out these kind of hard line, weeping and gnashing of teeth ones where you kind of go, ooh. And there's a few of them. There's a few of them. I think, what was it, a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the wedding banquet where some were cast aside, right? So, Jesus doesn't mince words um, in any of his. We just did last week. We did the blessings and the woes from Luke, right? Matthew, the blessings are all nicey. Oh, blessed are you. You're going to inherit this. You're going to live a nice life. Everything's going to be lovey-dovey, wonderful. Luke says, oh yeah, blessed are the people that suffer and mourn, and yeah, they're going to be blessed. But woe to you. Woe to you who are mean to others, who are too rich, who hoard, who put others down. You're going to get yours. So, there's always the and this is very hard for us as Lutherans, because we like to err on the side where we say we're saved by grace, not by our works. Okay, so it becomes very difficult. But there's also the look into your heart and how do you treat one another? Jesus is, when the lawyer came in the Good Samaritan story, what do I need to inherit eternal life? Love God, love your neighbor. Those are like the two most important ones. So if we can't show love for God and love for neighbor, and that's with what we do and what we say and how we treat people. So, there is something we have to do, but what Martin Luther was more talking about through faith was our faith makes us want to do something. Our faith makes us want to treat people, want to feed the hungry, want to, it's not that we're doing it to rack up points. That was Martin Luther's thing. There were people in his time that were doing nice things only to be seen doing nice things. Does everyone see that I'm putting a lot of money in the offering plate? Look at me, putting a lot of money in the offering plate. Aren't I wonderful? Or look, I'm feeding someone that's hungry. Does everyone see that? Look, I get 10 points for that. There were a lot at the time that thought it was a balance sheet, that, angels were up there with a tally. Oh, 10 points for Peter today. And then tomorrow, oh, -5. Alrighty, still in a plus. That's good. And your whole life would be a plus and minus and earning points and trying to climb our way up to God. And so the Lutheran understanding is more that God comes down to us. We don't need to climb up to God, that God comes and finds us in our messy world and in our brokenness and our sinfulness, and claims us there, rather than us having to work our way up and keep slipping and falling and not making it up to God because we can't be perfect. God says, I know you're not going to be perfect. That's okay. I'm coming down to you, and I'm going to be with you where you are. I'm going to try to teach you and try to get you to do better things and, be more faithful and treat people better. But if in the end you can't, I love you anyway. We were just talking about this morning. If you have kids, when they mess up, you say, I always love you, but I'm not happy with what you just did.
Right.
You're grounded. You're in trouble. You're in trouble. So maybe the grounding and stuff that, our kids get, or maybe if we get a ticket for doing something wrong, or, God forbid we wind up in jail for some infraction, maybe that's part of our like weeping and gnashing of teeth, where we need to learn that, oops, gotta shape up, gotta repent, gotta turn around, and not go down that road again. We gotta learn our lessons. And so part of some of these stories was Jesus trying to get people to learn their lesson, to say, okay, in the past we've treated people this way, and that's wrong, and now we need to treat people better. And
I
let me
think
show
of
you.
I think of the robber on the cross who last minute reprieve.
Right.
Was he a weed? I mean, I guess for most of his life he was a weed, and at the last minute he
Obviously, he was thought of as a weed. They were killing him.
Yeah, they were right. I mean, he probably, legally probably did a lot of things, wrong. But
Who knows?
God showed tremendous grace, and he actually, and mercy, and he, I guess his gnashing of the teeth was on hanging on the cross. But
And how close he got to.
yeah,
It was what, seconds, minutes, whatever. We don't know the exact timing, but
right,
very close to not going to a good place.
right.
And being that weed that would be forever judged a weed. But recognizing that God had mercy, and that Jesus was God, and that he could ask for mercy at his darkest, deepest point. Which goes back to kind of the weeds. Like, okay, people could judge you as a weed, but
Oops.
turn into the wheat, a good plant, and be saved.
Yeah.
Always that time until until you actually. Sorry, nursery school's very loud today. I don't know what's going on. They're usually pretty quiet. They're very loud today, picking up. But yeah. So, any other thoughts on these? On these judgment? Yeah, these are usually not ones we talk about in church, because they're kind of. I mean, sometimes I think weeds one might come up once in a while,
Yeah.
but we
You
don't
can't
necessarily.
sugarcoat it, right?
I'm sorry.
You can't sugarcoat it.
I mean, there is, I think Saint Francis said that the job of a preacher is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable.
Oh,
Oh,
So, our job is to, put, help people maybe correct themselves, but with mercy and with love, and those that, I always try to tend to stay away from the harsh, like the old Bible thumping, you have to do this, and fire and brimstone type of judgment, you know, you're gonna burn in hell if you don't do this or that or the other thing. Because I truthfully feel that most of us beat ourselves up more than we need anyone else to beat ourselves up. That most humans, most Christians know that they're not perfect, and they know when they make a mistake, and they know that they're broken. And for me to beat up on them when they're down and out is not helpful for anybody. So you know, I think we do enough of that for ourselves, and to each other, that we don't need the church to do that to us. You know, people need to be able to come to worship and come to a place where they're going to feel safe, and they're going to feel comforted, and they're going to feel God's grace and love and forgiveness. And that's the healing power that of the gospel that personally I feel that we should be more about. The church should be about than the beating people up for mistakes they made. But that's me. Not judging others for what road they may take. But anyway, so any other thoughts on our tough stories for today? Okay, then God be with you. Blessings. Go out and enjoy the beautiful weather God gave us today. And hopefully we will not have any more snow. And we'll be on the other side. And we'll see you next week. And then next week I will we'll go over again the schedule for Lent and where we're going to be and the timing of everything. Okay.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank you, Estes. Thank you, Vicar.
All right.
Thank
God
you.
bless. Have a great
Everybody
week,
take care.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Later, Pete.